I'm Christina Davis, Director of the Program on U.S.-Japan Relations. Good morning to those of you joining us from Japan, and thank you so much for those of us on the East Coast who are staying up for an evening of exciting conversation. We have one of the most important topics to discuss today. Our panel is on Japan's changing cybersecurity and the future of U.S.-Japan relations. Increasingly, we are realizing that interdependence also brings vulnerability, and everything from common goods to our telephone lines and the future of 5G and smart cities will allow progress, but we also worry about potential enemies gaining access to the networks or other violations from criminal networks. And so from the private firms to national governments to universities, we all are increasingly trying to learn more about cybersecurity. Well, today we have one of the leading experts on the topic to help us. It is my great pleasure to introduce Mihoko Matsubara, who is the Chief Cybersecurity Strategist at Nippon Telegraph and Telephone Corporation. She's previously worked at the Japanese Ministry of Defense, was Vice President and Public Sector Security Chief for Asia Pacific at Palo Alto Networks, and has also worked at Intel in Japan. She's also a public intellectual, sharing her expertise as an author and public speaker. She's published articles in many outlets and written a book, Cybersecurity, with the Japanese publisher Shinchosha. She is also the first Japanese individual to have spoken at the NATO International Conference on Cyber Conflict in Estonia back in 2015. And cybersecurity really requires many talents, a deep understanding of technology, business strategy, and government coordination, all with a talent for building confidence. And Matsubara-san has been an expert in all of these dimensions. And I would add, she also has been a viola player who was in her school orchestra. And perhaps it is the musical talent that lets her shift so seamlessly between government, business, and academic talks like we'll have today. So I'd like to remind you of our etiquette and our next event that is coming up. So we have next week, Rethinking Japan's Response to the COVID-19 Pandemic with Kenji Shibuya, which will again be an evening time event so that we can welcome participants from Japan as well as from Boston. And today we will be asking you to keep your microphone muted. If you would like to ask a question after the talk, please raise your hand in the participant button, or you can ask a question in the chat. Thank you so very much. Let's begin.
Okay, I have to take my PowerPoint slides out.
We have some really exciting slides to come up. So Miho's getting her slides ready to share with us. I already got a sneak peek, so I know what's coming. Here we go.
Thank you. Thank you for raising the expectations. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us today, and I really appreciate it. And there has been a lot going on in Japan in terms of cybersecurity. Tokyo 2020 Summer Olympic Games and Paralympic Games, and a decent announcement of cybersecurity strategy. So I'm really thrilled to share what's going on in Japan and how we can strengthen the Japan-US collaboration on cybersecurity. So first of all, what kind of cyber threats we are facing in the world and in Japan too. So obviously, we have been spending more time than ever online during this pandemic. And it has changed our behavior. Now we are keen to jump onto the latest information on the COVID-19 and also the work and US-China tensions. And actually the ratio to click phishing or spear phishing emails and skyrocketed from 5% to 40%. So we are now becoming more vulnerable to cyber attacks. However, even though that we are now using a wider variety of cyber security tools or IT, more variety of IT tools, especially cloud collaboration tools, including Zoom or WebEx or Teams or Slack, it doesn't necessarily mean that global organizations have provided cybersecurity training for their remote workers. In fact, NTT found out that only 43% of global organizations have provided cybersecurity training for their remote workers. So it explains that why Trend Micro found low cybersecurity awareness level among remote workers. Can you imagine that only 20% never use their work laptop for personal ends, such as online shopping, and 38%, almost 40% of global workers have uploaded their work data to non-work applications. So this is really scary. And we have less visibility over remote workers these days. And unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic increased the number of furloughed people and also laid off people. So there, even though the mounting insider threats out there, we are not necessarily providing enough tools or awareness training for our remote workers. And NTT found that the three most targeted sectors are manufacturing, healthcare, and education during the pandemic. And these three sectors are also the sectors that have the lowest cybersecurity maturity levels. So that is why they are so heavily targeted. And healthcare services sectors are one of the most targeted sectors during this pandemic. And of course, healthcare services have been always important and will be always important in the future, but more important during this pandemic to be able to access those services on a 24/7 basis. Yet they are not necessarily the most proactive sector in terms of cybersecurity. They tend to spend less cybersecurity budget compared to other sectors. So they spend on average 3 to 4% of their IT budget, whereas the financial sector spends 10.9% of their IT budget. So if you don't have enough amount of money, then you cannot really expect that they will have a sufficient amount of cybersecurity best practices. So most of cyber attacks are coming from phishing or spear phishing emails. So email security is crucial. However, 86% of healthcare institutions do not use any email scanning or filtering tools. This is scary. And cyber attacks on healthcare and cold chain coming from cyber espionage to steal COVID-19 pandemic medicine information or vaccine information, or ransomware attacks to disrupt their operations. And Japanese healthcare sectors has been also targeted by ransomware attacks and cyber espionage attempts over the last 20 months. And Shionogi, which is one of the major Japanese pharmaceutical company, and which is also one of the leading Japanese companies to research on the COVID-19 vaccines and medicines, they were hit by a ransomware attack through their Taiwanese branch last fall. So what about ransomware attacks? We've seen a lot of ransomware attacks news, especially after the Colonial Pipeline incident in the United States earlier this year. So we've seen a lot of more devastating scale of ransomware attacks, such as the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police was hit by a ransomware attack this April, and gigabytes of data on their police information, personal information, and also investigative information was stolen. And Colonial Pipeline, JBS, and Kaseya also had to stop their, suspended their business operations for a while. And Nippon is a major flour milling company based in Japan. And they recently revealed that they have to postpone the announcement of 2021 Q2 financial results from August to November because a major cyber attack encrypted a large amount of their business data. So they didn't say that a ransom was demanded, but sounds like because they encrypted their referral to encryption, it sounds like it was hit by a ransomware attack. So is there any difference between the ransomware attacks between Japan and the United States? Actually, yes. So in the United States, if you take a look at JBS, Kaseya, or Colonial Pipeline, and all those incidents happened at the U.S. headquarters, and of course, it's expanded, and the damages expanded all over the world. But still, they tend to hit the headquarters in the United States. However, in Japan, some of those incidents happen through their headquarters within Japan, but some of them are coming from their subsidiaries outside Japan, such as Taiwan, like Shionogi, United States, Germany, or Singapore. Because the Japanese companies have been investing a lot in the global market because of the shrinking populations and a lower number of birth rate. And expansion of their business operations outside Japan means that they have a more complicated practices for IT governance and cybersecurity governance. So it is more difficult for the Japanese companies to protect everything, including Japanese headquarters, but also subsidiaries outside Japan. So not only President Biden, but also former Prime Minister Suga have expressed their concerns over the damaging effects by ransomware attacks. So President Biden repeatedly said that ransomware attacks are raising national security concerns, and he handed over a list of red line, 16 critical infrastructures that they should be off the limit from cyber attacks, and including ransomware attacks. And Prime Minister Suga echoed President Biden's concerns at the G7 summit back in June. And he said that ransomware attacks and other types of cyber attacks and disrupt the foundation of our democracy and also challenges to our basic values. So I'm really glad that the two leaders from the largest democratic countries share the same view to the fight against the mounting ransomware attacks damages. So when I talk to leaders from industry, they have different opinions about how to tackle with ransomware attacks. Some people say that, okay, so because in some countries, payment of a ransom is not illegalized, so why don't we just pay to fix the problem quickly? Or some people say that, okay, so is it better to just, we have a blanket solutions to illegalize payment of ransom in every single country, so that the bad guys will not gain money from victims, so they will stop doing it. So it's not that simple. So because if you pay, you are devastating, and you want to get all of your data back and all of your business operations right back. However, even if you pay, only 8% of victims were able to recover all of that encrypted data, even after they paid a ransom. And if you pay, you still have to pay for recovery, investigations, and communications with your regulatory organizations and the customers. So actually, it means that you will double the recovery cost. And if you pay, you will be considered an easy target from bad guys community. So 80% of victims actually suffer from ransomware attacks, and most of them are coming from the same attacker. So what about Tokyo 2020? So that I just reiterated that we've seen that mounting cyber threats during this pandemic. And Japan just hosted the Tokyo 2020 Summer Olympic and Paralympic Games after 1 year postponement. So after Japan was selected to host Tokyo 2020 back in 2013, it was really a big moment for the Japanese government, but also the industry, because after looking at the cyber attack attempts against 2012 London Summer Olympic Games, Japan learned that the success of Tokyo 2020 will be not only the security and safety in the physical domain, but also cyber domains. So we really have to ramp up our national cybersecurity capabilities. So the major Japanese companies, including NTT, Hitachi, and NEC, decided to launch a cross-sector forum to define what cybersecurity professional means and what types of cybersecurity professional requires to earn what types of cybersecurity skill sets. Because even though it is only a simple word, cybersecurity professional, when you talk to help desk, when you talk to malware analyst, or when you talk to chief information security officer, all of them will be required to have a totally different set of skills. So that's why the Japanese major critical infrastructure companies from all of the sectors decided, okay, now we are hosting Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games in 5 years back then. And we have to share our best practices to define cybersecurity professionals and share that knowledge with academia to cultivate next generation cybersecurity pipelines, but also to influence policymaking processes in the government so that the government can include the industry's insights into next cybersecurity strategy. And some of the cross-sector forum members, companies, have been funding different Japanese Japanese undergraduate schools to have cybersecurity courses. And member companies have been invited to different Japanese government cybersecurity policy making conferences and meetings, and their publications have been also included in Japanese national level of cybersecurity strategy. So I think that this is a great movement from the Japanese industry to shape not only the strategy, but also Japanese next generation cybersecurity pipelines. And so this sounds like only domestic, but not really, because all of those Japanese critical infrastructure sectors also have a business presence outside Japan, including the United States. So that is why those companies chose the NIST cybersecurity framework as a global common language to communicate within Japanese companies, but also within their overseas subsidiaries, and also to talk to different government outside Japan. And also to do a better job about cybersecurity, information sharing is crucial to share the trend of cyber attacks and also cybersecurity best practices. And such framework is sometimes called Information Sharing and Analysis Center, ISAC. And the Japanese ICT ISAC and their American counterpart, US IT ISAC, have been collaborating over the last few years to share information on cybersecurity and cyber attacks but they finally formalized their collaboration 2 years ago to sign the memorandum of understandings to share cyber threat intelligence. And Japan also, because of the free and open Indo-Pacific, is not only in the physical domain, but also extends to cybersecurity. So Japan hosted an Indo-Pacific cyber exercise and inviting not only the US government, but also governments from European countries. So I'm really pleased to see that and this concept of free and open Indo-Pacific and then attracts a lot of attention outside the Pacific countries. And Japan has also made a really interesting and bold move earlier this year. So NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence in Tallinn, Estonia, annually hosts a cyber exercise since 2010. Unfortunately, they had to cancel it last year due to the pandemic, but they did it this spring virtually. And Japan, for the first time, formally participated in the exercise. And because this is such a popular event, so your country has to team up with another country. And this is national competition. So obviously you want to team up with best of the brightest from different countries. And because this is a NATO, even though this is virtual, this is a NATO hosted cyber exercise. So I would think that, or because the United States has military presence in Europe, so they can send somebody from Europe, but the United States government chose to send Indo-Pacific Command from Hawaii to team up with Japan. And from Japan, not only the Ministry of Defense and Self-Defense Forces, but also from different governmental bodies such as NISC, National Cybersecurity Center, and also Japanese critical infrastructure sector companies joined this exercise. And this scenario is always used the same fictional country, Crimsonia, countries to eagerly establish and creating artificial islands in the ocean, and then always keen to look for opportunities to embed into other countries. So this is the fusion of China and Russia. And then Japan decided to join this exercise. And because Crimsonia in a fictional country always attack different sectors of critical infrastructure in this locked sea scenario. So I'm really pleased to see that the Japanese government decided to invite not only from different ministries, but also critical infrastructure sectors to test all Japan preparedness and to the massive cyber attacks on different critical infrastructure sectors. And also, I also would like to introduce and highlight Japan's bold movement. So National Police Agency's head, Mr. Matsumoto, held a weekly press conference this April. And for the first time, he did a public attribution of cyber espionage attempts against 200 Japanese organizations, including JAXA. And he attributed this attempt to PLA cyber unit and also take a Chinese hacker group. And he said that these are the national and economic security challenges, and this attribution had already attracted foreign intelligence community's attention. So it sounds like, he didn't say clearly, but it sounds like the Japanese government is willing to do more of the public attribution, and also the attribution efforts will be done in the future in the collaboration with other intelligence organizations outside Japan. And so not only the press conference by the National Police Agency, but also the Japanese media reported about this public attribution efforts in detail about how TIC did it and how the PLA cyber unit did in the collaboration of Chinese students who are studying in Japan at that time. And Tokyo 2020 Summer Olympic and the Paralympic Games fortunately weren't disrupted by any major cyber attack during the game. And even though that no major English media highlighted the success of cybersecurity during the games, I'd like to introduce that very interesting article written by Dr. Brian Gantz in Security magazine 2 months ago. So he said that this is a success story of cybersecurity by the Tokyo 2020. And this was done by the aggressive preemptive measures. Because over the last few Olympic and Paralympic Games in the different cities have been targeted heavily by cyber espionage attempts and also financially motivated cyber criminals. So this is really amazing that the Tokyo 2020 operations was not disrupted by any major cyber attacks, even though that we saw some financially motivated and cyber and criminal activities during the games to create phishing sites. It looks like it's airing the Tokyo 2020 opening ceremony or the Tochirei movement. So because of we gained such great experiences and such a success from Tokyo 2020, what we should do from Japan is to make sure to share our struggles and success stories with the future host countries, Paris 2024, and also Los Angeles 2028. And the Japanese cybersecurity strategy was finally adopted by the cabinet meeting last month. And for the first time, based on the press conference by the national police agencies, the strategy mentioned China, North Korea, and Russia are the three major countries to launch cyber attacks. And also in the strategy, the Japanese government expressed their commitment to hold the attacker accountable by every possible measures, including diplomatic and economic measures. And the strategy for the first time referred to a free and open Indo-Pacific under the needs to strengthen the collaboration with ASEAN and also the Quad countries, the United States, Australia, and India. And also they said that we have already learned the lessons from Tokyo 2020, and we will take advantage of these lessons for the Osaka Expo 2025 and also the future Olympic Games. And also, even though that the Japanese Ministry of Defense and Self-Defense Forces repeatedly said that some cyber attacks can constitute a part of an armed attack, but this was the first time that the national cybersecurity strategy of Japan referred to their interpretation that cyber attacks can constitute part of an armed attack. So what does it mean? I interpreted that this is also another commitment of the Japanese government to make it easier for the Japanese Ministry of Defense and also self-defense forces to collaborate with other militaries outside Japan, because cyber exercises have been going on at the bilateral and also multilateral levels, such as locked seals, and also the traditional exercises, joint exercises between the different countries, also incorporated cyber elements these days. So this type of referral is very crucial for the future activities of the Ministry of Defense and self-defense forces. And for that, Japanese Defense White Paper 2021 released this summer also referred to the cybersecurity is crucial for the free and open Indo-Pacific and its security, and their efforts to strengthen cybersecurity collaboration with the United States, of course, but also the UK, Australia, India, and NATO and ASEAN countries. But to do that, the Ministry of Defense and self-defense forces have to have not only good technology, but also good people. So that is why, for the first time, the Japanese Ministry of Defense hired outside industry experts as cybersecurity advisors earlier this year to shape their defense strategy on cybersecurity. And the white paper also referred to the role of intelligence and SIGINT, but they didn't talk about what they mean by the role of intelligence in details. So what should we do for the future Japanese better cybersecurity and also for the stronger Japan-US collaboration on cybersecurity? So I'm really pleased to see other Japanese citizens that the Japanese government, but also Japanese companies have been making more efforts towards cybersecurity, and Japanese government is being more proactive doing attribution and public attributions, and also willing to share cyber threat intelligence with other countries. But to do that, we also have to do a supply chain risk management. That was included in Japan-US 2+2 joint statement, but also the Quad summit meeting statement for the ICT, 5G, and beyond 6G. And there have been multiple levels of cybersecurity collaboration between Japan and the United States over the last few years. But in addition to that, we are now expanding that collaborations to Quad, G7, G20, and now because Japan has gained so many lessons learned from Tokyo 2020. So now it's the turn for the Japanese government and the industry to share that insight with Los Angeles to make sure that you can have successful experiences and safe and secure operations of Los Angeles 2028. And of course, to do that, we have to have a lot of training and exercises. And they can be the cyber focus, but also that all domain, cross-domain focus exercises should be done between Japan and the United States and also Quad. So there has been really a lot going on in terms of cybersecurity in Japan and between Japan and the United States. And I really appreciate your interest in Japan and also in cybersecurity, because now everybody is using IT, and cybersecurity is everybody's problem and challenge and opportunity. So your attention and interest strengthens our cybersecurity efforts. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for a comprehensive look at Japan's cybersecurity problems, which of course are the same as those faced in the United States. I'm encouraged to hear about the depth of cooperation that is already taking place. We have a lot of interest in our audience, and I'm going to start with 2 questions from our associates at the program in US-Japan Relations, and then open it up to anyone who wants to raise their hand in the virtual list. So starting off, we have Mr. Keita Azuma, who is an associate with the program in US-Japan Relations this year, but he's actually joining us from Japan, currently working at the Cabinet Secretariat, while he's going to be, during his time at Harvard, doing research on US strategic response to gray zone challenges in the age of global power shifts. And I will have him ask his question first, and if you could hold your answer, and we'll go to our second question, and then you can answer the 2.
Thanks so much for the wonderful presentation. And I would like to ask the balance of cybersecurity capabilities and privacy in general. The attribution efforts could conflict with the secrecy of communication guaranteed by the Article 21 of the Japanese Constitution. So what are your thoughts on this?
So thank you for your question. So So lots of people say that, well, Japan has constitutions, on the secrecy of communications, so it really prohibits us from doing attribution. But yes, it would have some limitations compared to other countries. But looking at what kind of public attribution efforts have been done over the last few years, they are not only from the government, but also from private companies. And some companies only use publicly available information. So even though that Japan has some limitations due to the interpretations and the practices of Japanese constitutions, it doesn't mean that we cannot use other types of information. And Japan has a strength. We are located in the middle of the Asia, and we are the founder, and we launched the concept of the free and open in the Pacific region. Why? Because we really understand what's going on in Asia. So we should take advantage of our understanding of geopolitics and the history and the political and historical motivations to what drives cyber attackers to do such cyber espionage attempts and also cyber disruptive efforts. So to do that, we can also, maybe we cannot name the specific actor, but we can still narrow down the potential attackers, and also we can explain what's going on in these regions and share that knowledge with the United States and also other countries as well.
Thank you very much.
Our next question will be by Masahiko Furuya, who comes to us from the Ministry of Finance. And while he's a visitor with the program in US-Japan relations, he's looking at questions about international coordination on defense equipment procurement. Please go ahead and ask your question, Furuya-san.
Thank you for your very informative and impressive presentation. And I have a question about the role of the government as a whole for the cybersecurity. Recent years, Japanese ICT, information communication technology, or I should say the use of the ICT is behind the other countries. And recently, digital agencies was set up. But I understand the digital agency is not charged of cybersecurity. So, do you think? Do you think the Japanese government works enough for the cybersecurity, or you mentioned the next step? So what is the role of the government for the next step?
Thank you for your question. So even though that the job description of the Japanese newly established digital agency doesn't necessarily say that they will work on cybersecurity, but it sounds like they also have to incorporate the cybersecurity insights and practices to move forward the digitization of Japanese government. Because looking at the Japanese government issued cybersecurity strategy and also instructions, every single document nowadays says security by design. So I'm sure that even though that the digital agency has not explicitly said that they will do cybersecurity yet, but they have to do practices security by design for their digitization efforts. And also the new digital minister, Karen Makishima, Dr. Karen Makishima, tweeted last night, and thank you that being appointed as the new minister. And she also said that she will cover cybersecurity. So it sounds like that as the minister for digitization, she will not cover only the IT issues, but also cybersecurity.
Great.
Thank you.
And next we have Professor Shuhei Kurizaki of Waseda University. He's posted his question in the chat, but would you go ahead and ask your question directly as well?
Sure. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your service to protect our, cyberspace. We don't often see that those attacks because perhaps your efforts and your colleagues. So I thank you very much for your service. So my question, as an academic, I have to sort of think through these issues in terms of academic literature, I guess. So with respect to the use of force or national security, the academic literature often distinguish between defense and deterrence, right? Defense is sort of an effort to fend off of the offensive when attacks are already underway, whereas deterrence is essentially a prevention of such offensives. So I was just curious about, what kind of the sort of strategies dealing with cybersecurity issues is a common practice among the practitioners. So that's the first question. The second question is, whatever sort of the security strategy you might have, you have to know who we are dealing with. So my question is, who are those attackers, and do you see any systematic patterns in the selection of the targets? In other words, do we really have the knowledge or information about the distribution of attackers, right? That is, do we really know when when those attacks are happening? I know too many questions, perhaps, but.
Thank you. So I will take your first question about, or it's more like on active defense. So there are lots of confusion about how to interpret the word security concept or security terminology is called active defense. And if you take a look at the dictionary published by national security agencies or SANS, US-based international cybersecurity educational organizations, they denies that active defense includes offensive capabilities. So what it means that they will actively look for what kind of tactics that the potential cyber attackers are using, and what kind of vulnerabilities they are using, so that they can proactively defend and patch vulnerabilities within their IT network and IT assets, so that they can minimize the damages caused by potential cyber attacks. But some people interpret active defense differently. That it means that because there are so many cyber attackers out there, and it can be sometimes very disruptive. So it means that we should preemptively launch cyber attacks or other types of attacks so that we can limit, or we can actually zero-nize their offensive capabilities to protect ourselves. But now I actually concurs with the interpretation of an NSA and also SANS to deny the interpretation to include offensive capabilities. Why? Because cybersecurity is a bit different from other domain security, because everybody uses IT. And cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility. And if you include an offensive capabilities, it doesn't apply to civilians, academia, and industry people. So what we have to do is proactively looking for the indication of cyber attacks to protect ourselves at our utmost efforts. And your second question about, do we see patterns of cyber attacks? It really depends. So it also links up to your question about active defense, because if you actively looking for indications of cyber attacks, you have to depends on, and you have to actively looking for news sources, reliable information, because you cannot just focus on only one single intelligence source. So you have to look at the dark web information, and you also have to look for different information published by different vendors. And sometimes you see the patterns that, okay, so this state-sponsored actors tend to target this sector in this country. But looking at the recent movement of ransomware criminals groups, they sometimes change the name, and they wrote to delay the investigative efforts by different law enforcement. So sometimes you see patterns, but sometimes it's difficult, and you sometimes think that, oh, we might have lost the track, but you have to keep looking. I hope these answered your questions.
We have a question in the chat from Kim Ashizawa asking about government efforts to promote women in cybersecurity. And if you could hold your answer, and I'd also like to call on Professor Kaoru Iokibe of Tokyo University, who is a visiting researcher with the program on US-Japan relations. Professor Iokibe, if you could ask your question.
Thank you, Professor Davis. But it's a bit embarrassing. Unlike previous questioners, I am a complete outsider of this field. My major is 19th century Japanese history. But still, in many ways, your talk is extremely inspiring. And I'm especially interested in the Japanese companies' vulnerability against attacks on their subsidiaries on abroad. And I'd like to hear more about it from you. And if you'd like to be, you'd like me to be more specific, well, it is not only Japanese companies that globalize its business. United States or Korea or many countries around the world is doing their business globally. So what is the peculiar, specific weakness of Japanese companies compared with other globalized enterprises? This is my question.
So I only have taken a look at the statistics in Japanese companies and also US companies. So I do not know about other companies based in other countries. So, but comparing that, so the Japanese Information Technology Promotion Agency under the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, METI, asked one question to companies in Japan and also in the United States a few years ago. And at that time, more companies based in Japan say that they do not know what kind of cybersecurity governance efforts are done in our subsidiaries outside Japan. And it is difficult for us to instruct our subsidiaries outside Japan in terms of cybersecurity governance. And this percentage was much higher compared to companies based in the United States. So this might have changed because it has been almost 4 to 5 years. And we just had Tokyo 2020, and it was the big push for the better cybersecurity in Japan. But and also, this is not only about the globalization of business operations outside Japan, but also the COVID-19 pandemic really complicated the efforts of IT governance and cybersecurity. Because now we use more VPN, and some companies use a remote desktop more than ever compared to pre-pandemic era. And sometimes, unfortunately, even though it should not happen, but some companies forget that the old legacy devices are connected to their network, and they are just left behind. They are never patched. So bad guys take advantage and to exploit those vulnerabilities to sneak into your IT network. it happens sometimes. I think that it sometimes happens outside Japanese subsidiaries, but I'm sure that it also happens to elsewhere as well.
Thank you very much.
We have the question in the chat. One was, how is Japan promoting women in cybersecurity? And another asks how the Japanese government promotes cybersecurity cooperation with startups in the private sector and trying to recruit those types of connections between government and startups that are expert in cybersecurity.
So women in cybersecurity has been a big topic over the last decade or so in Japan, but also in the United States, because the ISC Square international cybersecurity educational organizations found that the world is short of 3.12 million cybersecurity professionals as of 2020. So it's a big number, and women account for only 20% of current cybersecurity population. And because IT users are 50-50, men and women, so it means that we have more room for women to join the cybersecurity career. So there has been some grassroots level of movements in Japan to bring in not only women, but younger generations to cybersecurity. So one of my NTT colleagues launched CTF for girls. So CTF stands for Catch the Flag. So it's a cybersecurity skill set competition. So they regularly host CTF for girls gatherings. So they do some quiz to test their cybersecurity knowledge, and they study together. And because this is for beginners, so they really wanted to make sure that so the atmosphere is friendly, so that you can ask any questions freely on the basic questions on cybersecurity, so that you will be more interested in cybersecurity and also be more interested in the people who are hosting that kind of events and look up for them to be that kind of cybersecurity professionals in the future. And also in the United States, and there are other types of efforts going on, such as women in cybersecurity conferences, and also girls who code, and also after school activities for girls in cybersecurity.
These are exciting developments. We have 5 minutes left, and I would like to ask a question about the 5G networks and their connection to security. NTT has rolled out a new 5G network and is really taking a leadership role in Japan. But of course, the world is also concerned about the provision of 5G by China, and we have many companies that are trying to develop 5G. How much truth is there to the security risk of having Huawei 5G network?
So in general, not only 5G, but in any generation of communications, and what telecommunication companies have to take a look at always is that supply chain. So you have to have reliable source to obtain that generation of communication devices, but not only to get that specific types of communication devices, but you also have to have reliable maintenance support and other types of efforts in the future until the end of the support period. And unfortunately, it turned out, as everybody knows, that there is an only limited number of 5G related technology suppliers in the world. So that is why we are now doing not cross vendor approach to be able to flexible and switch different suppliers in the future without incurring significant cost by switching our suppliers. So it is called an ORAN. An ORAN alliance, an open ORAN policy alliance have been there in the collaboration between the government and industry, and to do their utmost efforts to provide a supply chain risk management and also cross-vendor approach for flexibility and open and transparent competition. And NTT has been NTT is a member, founder, and also the member of the ORAN Alliance.
And is there government support for this development of new technology?
Yes, so ORAN is from the industry initiatives, but ORAN has been repeatedly referred in the Japan-US 2+2 documents this spring, and also the Quad Summit meeting and issued the joint statement, and they also talked about ORAN. This is the direction they should go, as they said.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. I don't see any other questions, and so I'd like to take this time to thank our speaker.
Oh, can I say one thing?
Sure.
Okay. So I really appreciate your time and interest in cybersecurity. And some people come up to me to say that, oh, I'm not an expert on cybersecurity, but I have a question. But this is exactly what this kind of webinar is for, or this kind of events for, because you use IT. We are now using ITs to communicate to each other, and cybersecurity is a fundamental part to communicate in a safe and secure manner. So if you are not interested in cybersecurity, then who would care to do this? So I really appreciate your questions and interest and time, and I really look forward to continue to talking to you. Thank you so much. Oh, you are muted.
Thank you very much for all of your work to help us understand and to help companies in Japan do better and to advise governments. It really is extremely valuable work. And I know that I will be sharing what I learned tonight with other people I meet, and so will our audience. So you are having a network effect to spread information with everyone. Thank you so very much. This seminar has been sponsored by the special series on Japan-US cooperation and digital governance, and it's also part of Harvard Worldwide Week 2021, which is hosted by the Office of the Vice Provost for International Affairs. We are really happy that we were able to bring to you today Mihoko Matsubara. Please join me in thanking our speaker and thanking the program staff for bringing this event to us all.